Hello, welcome to Unboxed God, where we detox from religion and discover God who refuses to fit inside the boxes we were given. I'm Tolu Sarah Johnson, and here we explore who God really is beyond fear, beyond formulas, and beyond everything we were taught to perform. If you're hungry for a real relationship with Him, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. So, still on my current book, Father, Make Me Yours Alone, Becoming God's Robot, not by force, but by love. And I am now going to chapter 17, which says, When striving dies and trust lives. Yes, letting go ends exhaustion, trusting begins peace. So when you let go is the end of the exhaustion, and trusting brings peace. It's a daily act for me, I must say, because there needs to come to a moment in your everyday believer's journey when the soul finally reaches its limit, not in rebellion, but in a weary surrender. It is that moment when striving collapses and trust quietly rises. When the heart whispers, Papa, I can keep trying to earn you. When Papa keeps saying it over the 500 plus of conversations we did, Tolu, I love you. Tolu, you don't need to do that. Tolu, you don't need to do this for me to love you. Over time, I started seeing that all this trying to end doesn't work. And I have to get to a stage where I can say, I can't keep trying to end you. And Father, once I'm my child, you never had to. And this is where striving needs to die. This is where trust lives. This is where the exhausted believer steps out of religion's prison and into Jesus' rest. Yes, the cycle of exhaustion, that religious bondage needs to stop. Striving is the heartbeat of religion. It is the exhausting, anxious effort rooted in the fear that you must constantly perform to remain accepted. Religion will teach you do more, be more, try harder, and what Jesus already paid for. And without realizing it, believers step into the spiritual hamster wheel, running endlessly but going nowhere. Yes, many Christians live trapped in a painful cycle. Let me repeat again. Many Christians live trapped in a painful cycle. Praying for an hour out of fear, they haven't prayed enough. Forcing themselves to read scriptures as a duty. Attending church as a box to tick. Giving out of guilt and fear of punishment. Evaluating spirituality based on performance. Feeling perpetually unworthy. That was me. Terrified that one mistake could derail their salvation. That was me. So religion convinces them that spiritual activity equals spiritual approval. But striving is not holiness. It is the bondage wearing a Christian mask. And the outcome of self-effort exhausts the soul. It produces burnout, emotional fatigue, resentment towards God, spiritual dryness, hidden shame, comparison, condemnation, and a deep unhappiness masked by fake religious smiles. This is not Christianity. It is captivity. It is the yoke of slavery Paul warned about. A yoke Jesus never placed on anyone's shoulder. The difference is profound. Striving, doing in human strength, grace, divine empowerment beyond your ability. So you have to choose, is it striving or grace? Jesus never asks you to obey without him. He asks you to obey through him. Without grace, obedience is impossible. With grace, obedience becomes instinctive. So you need to get to a stage where you've got the freedom of acceptance, where striving dies. The moment the heart finally believes, I am loved, I am accepted, I am enough, because Jesus said it is finished. Not it is started, not it is potential, not it is conditional. It says it is finished. And trusting the finality of the cross. When Jesus declared, "It is finished," he ended the entire religious scoring system. He silenced the inner critic. He removed the tally chart. He destroyed the spiritual performance treadmill. You no longer have something to prove. You now have something to trust. Rest is not laziness. Rest is not apathy. Rest is not spiritual laziness. Rest is abiding, leaning, listening, flowing, yielding, and moving when the Spirit moves. Rest produces fruit naturally. Striving produces thorns relentlessly. So, most believers resist surrender until pain breaks the illusion of control. Trials brings us to the end of our strength so that trust can begin. Yes, I must tell you, I was like that. Suffering was a catalyst for my own surrenderness. I don't know what your own catalyst is going to be, but sometimes Papa has to do that. And when striving dies on the altar of disappointment, trust rises like a resurrection. Pain ends self-reliance. Pain births dependence. Pain births surrender. Pain births trust. And when striving finally dies, the heart becomes governed by a wholly new operating system, trust. Trust replaces fear. Trust replaces anxiety. Trust replaces control. Trust replaces striving. And surrendering the timeline. Trust requires you to give God your expectations, your schedule, your deadlines, your visions of how things should be, your fear of waiting. The mind screams for clarity, the heart surrenders to mystery. Trust say, even when I cannot trace your hand, I trust your heart. Active collaboration with the Holy Spirit. Trust doesn't make you passive. It makes you responsive. It is not inactivity. It is cooperation. A life of trust is listening to the gentle whisper, following the slightest nudge, speaking when he prompts, being silent when he restrains. And this is the rhythm of the surrender believer. Obedience from rest. Obedience becomes easy, not because life gets easier, but because you stop carrying it alone. Obedience flows from love, intimacy, alignment, and peace. You stop following rules. You start following it. Let's close with this analogy of the white water rafter. The difference between striving and trusting is like navigating a treacherous river, rapid known as raging rapid run. Let me say it again. The difference between striving and trusting is like navigating a treacherous river known as the raging rapid run. Striving, which is trying to row against the current. The religious believer grabs the paddle, self-will, and panics their way through the river, rowing frantically, fighting the current, trying to avoid every rock, terrified of making a mistake, exhausted, drowning in fear. This is the life of spiritual striving. Exhaustion without progress. But trust, surrendering to the master's guide, the believer who chooses rest and the primary control of the master guide, the Holy Spirit. The guide knows the river perfectly. Every drake, every rock, every sharp turn, every safe channel. The believer still holds the paddle. Free will still exists, but their strength is no longer powering the journey. They listen, they follow, they trust. The guide's voice steers the raft. The current of grace carries them forward. The movement is smooth. The journey is peaceful. The exhaustion is gone. The power source changed. Not the river, not the raft, not the believer, the source. So as we conclude this chapter, this is the miracle of surrender. Striving ends in exhaustion. Trust ends in rest. Striving suffocate. Trust breathe. Striving enslaves. Trust liberate. Do you want me to say it again? Striving ends in exhaustion. Trust ends in rest. Striving suffocate. Trust breathe. Striving enslaves. Trust liberate. The moment you stop roaring against the current and start trusting the guide who knows the river, you discover the freedom you always long for. Your heart finally sits down. Your mind becomes calm. Your soul becomes light. Your journey becomes peaceful. And heaven whispers, "Welcome home, child. This is the life I always wanted to give you." God bless.